Hello and welcome to another Star Wars The Old Republic video. In this video, we are going to be going over a lot of details about the gearing as it stands on 7.0 through the PTS. So I'm going to cover a lot of different things. There's a lot of information in here. I highly suggest you use the chapters and the timestamps to look around for the information that's relevant to you, as some of this information is really not going to be relevant to the average player, and it's more a deep dive into all the different systems, understanding how the different paths work, and explaining what it is. There's no easy way to put it. They've made it extremely complex to what we're used to. If you are familiar with a lot of other MMOs, you probably will recognize a lot of aspects of this, but if you're newer to the MMO genre and you're used to the 6.0 gearing style, this is going to seem very confusing. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the different types of gear that are available to you, the different paths that you take to upgrade them, all the currencies that are involved in that, how the different item ratings work, which gear is better than what gear. We're going to give you some tips and tricks on how to farm gear, talk about how the actual upgrading process works, stuff like that. A summary kind of what's changing about gearing from 6.0 to 7.0. Alright, so let's look at the different vendors that are available on the PTS to get a general idea of the different types of gear. So I'm going to start over here in the combat section of Fleet with the PvP gear vendor. This one is going to be able to give you item rating 316 gear when you have the appropriate currency from PvP.
Good hunting.
And then you're going to upgrade it using the PvP upgrade vendor, which currently I have 0 PvP gear, so we're not seeing anything in the upgrade vendor. Spoils of War vendor area here, you'll still be able to buy your tacticals. Here's our Conquest gear vendor. So once you reach level 80, you're able to go and buy stuff from here. The minimum item rating is going to be 320. You're going to use the medals of accommodations as well as credits, which come from completing your personal conquest. Once you have Conquest gear, you can go to the upgrade vendor and you're going to use 2 types of currency, plus an existing piece, you can upgrade it. When it comes to the Flashpoint and Operations gear, there are only upgrade vendors. There's no vendors to buy the base gear. You can only upgrade gear that you've collected. And then there's going to be your legendary implants. These are basically the new set bonuses. They've been moved to your 2 implants. They're calling them legendaries. I wonder what game they're copying. You talk to this guy, he's going to give you a mission. You're going to charge up that device that he gives you 100 charges. A lot of those charges will just come from making personal conquest and then just doing random stuff around the galaxy. Once you've unlocked that, you now have the ability to buy legendaries. These will start at item rating 326, and when you buy multiples of them, you will eventually be given an upgrade at 328 and then an upgrade at 330. Tech frags is going to be the most expensive part about buying these ones, so that's why in my previous video I suggested that you stockpile crates that have tech frags in them. Alright, so now that we know the basics of what gear is going to be available to us, let's look at this graphic that I made up. This took me about 5 hours to make up after a lot of research. So how I've broken this down is I've got originally on top, I've got the gearing currencies that you're going to need to go through different upgrade paths. And then I've got the actual gear paths themselves and some other info. So let's start off with the actual currencies. So in blue, you can earn medals of accommodations and you can earn aquatic resource matrix. These are the 2 primary sources of upgrade currency that are used for everything, including legendaries. You can earn the medals of accommodations primarily through doing your personal conquest goal, as well as they will drop off of random enemies you kill, and some of the weeklies will provide you some as well. The aquatic resource matrix, you're going to be getting those primarily through doing heroics and weekly missions, as well as enemies do have a chance to drop them, and then uprisings are another source as well. There's both weekly and individual missions for uprisings will drop that. So now let's take a look at Decurion isotope stabilizers. These are the ones that are Flashpoint specific. You can get these from Flashpoint bosses or deconstructing Flashpoint gear, and it's only used for upgrading Flashpoint gear. Hazardous Matter Catalyst, this is the operations-based upgrade currency, and you get it from operation bosses, from the weeklies, and from deconstructing operations gear. And again, this is only used to upgrade operations gear. Thrizian Production Accelerant, don't know how you say that, I hope that's kind of close. This one is specific to PvP gear, and you get it from doing the weeklies as well as individual PvP matches. How this turns out into upgrading your gear. So if we look at our Conquest gear, you can see that I've got 2 little bar graphs beside it showing the relative amount of currency you need from both medals of accommodation and aquatic resource matrix to upgrade that. And it's all these bars are created to be relative to each type of gear, so you get a general idea that Flashpoint gear requires a crap ton of Decurion isotope stabilizers compared to any other gearing path, but it also requires less medals of accommodation and a lot less aquatic resource matrix than doing the Conquest gear path. Conquest gear, you can purchase this directly from the vendor, and then you upgrade it at the vendor from existing Conquest gear. That's the only way. Flashpoint gear. This is primarily dropped from Flashpoint bosses, so you have like a 70-ish% chance of getting one piece of gear from each Flashpoint boss. Otherwise, you will just get currency itself. The actual chance is just a guess, it could be lower than 70%. It also drops from Flashpoint weekly crates, so that's another great source of Flashpoint gear. And you can upgrade it at the vendor from matching Flashpoint gear. Operations gear, primarily from operation bosses. Very similar to how Flashpoint gear works. There's a chance you'll get the currency instead of getting a piece of gear. They haven't fully flushed out the system. They talked about wanting to have guaranteed upgrade tokens. Haven't seen that yet on PTS. They also drop from operation weekly crates, and you upgrade them at the vendor from the matching gear. PvP gear is primarily from the PvP vendor, as well as you can get it from the PvP crates, and you have to upgrade it at the vendor from matching PvP gear. Conquest gear is the only one that just uses aquatic resource matrix and metals of accommodation. Every other path requires both of those, plus a custom material. Now, you can skip the currency thing entirely by getting the crates through the weeklies. The thing that's really going to be a shock or a change for a lot of people coming from 6.0 is the fact that barely any gear drops. So we were used to getting gear drops from pretty much every content we did, and you just sort through and you find whatever is the best for you. Now you're only going to get gear to drop from very specific stuff, very specific content, and you'll see much lower gear. So instead of playing for 20 hours and getting 200 pieces of gear to drop, you're going to play for 20 hours and get 20 pieces of gear. Those numbers are made up just to give you an idea of how significant the change is. So there's a few other things we'll notice about the graphic in terms of the minimum and maximum item rating levels. You'll notice there's different colors. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but let's focus on these upgrade currencies and the crates on how you get them. So where are we going to get the majority of the ways to find these? So there's terminals in the combat section of Fleet. You can get the PvP mission terminal to get all the PvP stuff. You've got your operations terminal, your priority missions, which will be your weeklies for flashpoints as well as uprisings. You've got your heroics mission terminal, and then you've got the actual uprising terminals themselves for the 3 different difficulties. So I've already gone ahead and I've picked up all of these missions so that we can start talking about them. Alright, so let's look at the different ways that you can earn the different currencies. So metals of accommodation, how are we going to get these? Primarily through doing your personal conquest, you're going to be rewarded a large amount of metal of accommodations. That is the main source. You can also get them through enemies that you kill in the open world and different places they can drop. And there are a few activity finder bonuses that will drop some metal of accommodation. It's a very small amount, so it's not going to make a big difference to you. Moving on to the aquatic resource matrix, this is where things start to get a bit interesting. The primary source that I've seen is doing the weekly missions for heroics, doing the daily missions for heroics, as well as under the activity solo tab, there will be daily areas that will provide a weekly. The way they're doing weeklies is not everything in the game is going to be available for a weekly mission anymore. They're going to give you a certain selection. So right now it's typically been 4 planets for the weekly heroic mission and then 2 areas for the daily area mission. So this is a great way to get those additional aquatic resource matrix, is doing daily areas when they're fast. You don't want to do ones that take you, say, 2 hours to complete. And if they do take that long, consider grouping up with some people because none of them should take that long. And then the last way that we're going to earn aquatic resource matrix, or at least primarily, is through uprisings. Right now, I don't think the amount that they reward for uprisings is a great amount, but I have not actually practiced any uprisings to see if the individual bosses in there drop anything special. But time will see when 7.0 is live if they change that, or if just because I haven't tested it, maybe the bosses drop something as well. Moving on to getting currency and upgrades for flashpoints. If you're going to use the upgrade currency, you still have to do all the stuff we just talked about for the previous 2 currencies. Now, additionally, there is a weekly mission for flashpoints where you'll be rewarded a crate that gives you a guaranteed upgrade piece. The flashpoints themselves will give you the currency. The other thing that's really important to note, you'll notice that there's only a certain amount of flashpoints that are now being filtered and available to you. This is the theme of weekly stuff, and you have to make sure that all of these are selected. You do not get a choice. You have to leave all available. So it's a little bit hit or miss on which flashpoints you'll get, how long they'll take, in addition to the randomness of getting a group that may or may not be as good. And then they have the same idea for master mode flashpoints, where instead of getting a green upgrade crate, you're going to be getting a blue upgrade crate, as well as some tech frags on both of those weeklies. Moving on to the operations gear. They are going to be providing weeklies again. Individual bosses will continue to be a source of the upgrade currency and potentially gear drops at the same item rating. And then the weekly will provide you with the crate that gives a guaranteed upgrade, as well as the upgrade materials. And as you increase the difficulty of the operations you do, you will be getting a better type of gear from the crate, as well as you'll be getting a larger amount of that upgrade currency. And then if we look at the unranked PvP, we're going to be getting our guaranteed upgrade crate. PvP is the only one that acts a little bit weird. It starts as green gear, and then as the item rating increases, it goes green, blue, purple, etc. In addition, you'll still get the upgrade currency as well as tech frags and a couple of aquatic resource matrix. If we look at the ranked rewards, you're going to be getting a lot of tech frags, the upgrade currency for PvP, and a small amount of aquatic resource matrix. So one of the things I've been researching and trying to figure out is the fastest way to gear up. Now, it's always a bit of a catch-22. If you want to play a game where you want to grind things out the fastest you can, the most efficient way, it quite often detracts from the enjoyment of the game. So be cautious in deciding whether or not you want to go and do things the fastest way possible. That said, the way that they're forcing weeklies to be a certain amount of content, if you want to get rewarded faster, it can feel a bit punishing to not go after those weeklies. To that result, there's going to be certain ways that you can farm content faster to not get slowed down too much. Heroics, really, really important in heroics if you want to make them faster and easier, being grouped up and being a stealth character. So a lot of heroics will go faster when you group up with people, and a lot of heroics do go faster when you're on a stealth class. It's picking and choosing. I'm going to be making some videos in the future about the different heroics, the different weeklies, each planet, saying how fast each one is if you're playing solo, and if you're playing on a stealth class versus not playing on a stealth class. So you can have a general idea of when it's worth actually going after a planetary weekly versus just doing the fastest heroics or doing the ones that you enjoy the most. When it comes to the actual flashpoints, we'll be looking at that too. The problem with flashpoints is you're not guaranteed to get flashpoints that are quick and easy to complete. So looking at how much we want our time to be valued versus how much we enjoy the content, you're really going to want to take a look and say, do I want to roll the dice on gearing through flashpoints, or do I just enjoy flashpoints enough that I don't care about the time efficiency loss? I'm not going to a lot of detail on this, but basically the general idea when it comes to finding the most efficient way to gear up and some tips and tricks out of all the things I've been finding, I'm going to make some videos coming out about heroic missions because I see heroics as a great way to find some efficiency in grinding out the maximum item rating. Main things to take away from this is the fact that you need to be looking at which heroic missions are worth your time to play, which ones you definitely want to have a group if you're going to do them, and a lot of them are faster on a stealth character. The videos I'm going to bring out are looking at if you're a solo player, just to kind of cover your bases because they're always going to be faster with group play, and we'll look at which ones are faster doing on a stealth class, which ones take the same amount of time, how long each one took. Then you can have a general idea to figure out, is it worth actually doing some of these heroics to get the weekly for that planet, or should I just skip the weekly entirely? So the other thing you're going to want to look at is how you mix and match gear to upgrade the fastest. So in general, the way that the currency upgrading works, it's going to be a little bit hard. It's going to be a little bit annoying to keep getting that currency if you're mixing and matching tiers. You're just going to end up with some excess materials anyways. The biggest limiting factor will be the aquatic resource matrix because they're required for everything, and primarily you get them from doing heroic. But you do have those weekly crates available to you, which are going to be a very powerful method of gaining gear upgrades. The downside of the weekly crates is the fact that we're having to play that content specifically with the randomness of not knowing. If you do have 4 players who will play flashpoints with you and you enjoy playing with them, by all means, that's going to be a great way. Just leave everything checked on the filter, make a group of 4, go in, you get to play with your friends, you get to have fun, who cares if it's the fastest way or not. If we look at how I've been gearing up on the PTS, I've got a mixture of gear. So I've got Elite Decurion gear, which is your veteran mode flashpoint gear. I've got your Noble, which is your Conquest gear. I've got your Kalumai, which is your veteran mode operation gear. I've got your Supreme, which is your master mode flashpoint gear. I've got my 2 legendary items, and I don't have it equipped because it's one of my implants, but I also got a Rakata piece from master mode operations. So why am I showing you the fact that I farmed all these different gear paths? Well, because I found it was more efficient. I like playing different content. I don't want to be bored just farming the most efficient content and doing nothing else. I don't want to just be spamming the fast tick heroics all day long until I get enough resources to just have conquest gear and then start doing flashpoints and upgrading. Alright, let's talk a little bit about horizontal gear progression. Now, this is something that is a complex topic that you don't fully need to understand to play the game, but if you really want to know what it's going to be like with these 7 trees, potentially 9 trees of gear, and how to switch between them back and forth, that's what this section is for. So if we look at our graphic over here, we're going to see that I've provided some arrows, sometimes going in both directions, sometimes only going in one direction between the different stuff. So it's very important to know that even within the flashpoint category or the operations category, there are 2 or 3 distinct types of gear that you can get, and they don't mix and match without this horizontal gearing I'm going to be talking about. So let's start over with our conquest gear. So conquest gear can only be purchased from the vendor. and it can only be upgraded using the upgrade vendor. There is no way to get back to Conquest gear once you've reached a higher item rating on other types of gear path. So horizontally, there is no horizontal progression back to Conquest gear, but you can horizontally progress outside of Conquest gear. So what that means, horizontal progression, is you can have Conquest gear that you want to upgrade to, say, Master Mode Flashpoint gear or Master Mode Operations gear, and there's a way to keep the same item rating while converting your pieces over. So through RNG drop, when you defeat bosses, they have a chance to give you an item piece. And if that item piece on a slot where you're currently wearing Conquest gear, now you can change it to be the same item rating, but that type of gear. So if I'm doing a Master Mode Flashpoint and I get a blue Supreme helmet to drop for me, then I can equip that blue Supreme helmet, and now I've transitioned from being on the Conquest path to being on the Master Mode Flashpoint gear path. Same thing with PvP, you can technically get there, but only using the crates that are given to you, as there's no actual way to get individual gear drops. So within the Flashpoint tree itself, you have the two different types of gear you can get from doing either Veteran or Master Mode Flashpoints. You can transition between those two types when you're playing the different content and getting those drops, or by using the crates. You can also transition out of the Flashpoint gear into Operation gear and PvP gear. Looking at Operation gear, there's 3 trees there that we're going to be looking at, and you can transition within those 3 trees by playing the different difficulties and getting drops from bosses or using the upgrade crate. And of course, you can transition out of Operations gear into Flashpoint gear or PvP gear. And then PvP, you can definitely transition into Flashpoint and Operation gear through boss drops and crates, and you can transition back into PvP gear through the crates. So that's the general idea with horizontal gearing. So the idea being that you can use a mixture of gear to get to the item rating you want, and then you can start using this horizontal gearing by playing the content that drops the gear you ultimately want, and start transitioning pieces at the same item rating into that gear type. There will be probably a little bit of a cheese that players can use. If they can just barely beat enough enemies on a Master Mode Flashpoint to get gear upgrade, they could really grind their way through very inefficiently using the upgrade vendor by getting a piece of gear, horizontal progression, and then upgrade vendor using currencies from easier difficulties to get a full set of Master Mode Flashpoint gear without having to actually defeat all of the different bosses and doing the weekly for the crate. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about gear upgrading. There are a couple things that you will want to be aware of when upgrading gear at the vendor. There's going to be a cost. That infographic showed you the approximate ratio of the cost of the different currencies for every path. Generally, what's going to happen is you have to have the piece either equipped or in your inventory for it to show up on this list here. And if you're using different types of gear, which I'm doing right now, changing to all would show me more gear that's in my inventory that I can upgrade. When you upgrade gear, it's very important to know that it actually deletes the original piece and gives you a brand new piece. I am going to lose everything that's inside of there. So if you are choosing to augment your gear to be more powerful when 7.0 is out and you're doing your gearing, make sure that you take your augment out and any color crystals out before you go ahead and upgrade that piece. Otherwise, you're going to lose those. The crates are going to work a little bit differently. I've shown this in some other videos. The crates are simply going to give you a new piece of gear, and then you'll swap it with what you have equipped. So you're not going to lose anything when you open up a crate, but when you spend at the upgrade vendor, you are going to actually spend that item. As you can see, it's part of the cost. Okay, so let's also talk a little bit about the gear stat differences between certain stuff. So generally your green gear is going to be the same stats, except that PvP gear will have a different set of stats on it. Now we're going to be getting blue and purple gear as well. There are definitely some differences depending on where the gear drops from, in addition to the color. So I've gone and run the numbers on a couple of things just to compare Conquest gear versus Operation gear. One of the things to note is that when you are running green gear, tanks are actually going to have less endurance than DPS. I think the idea behind this is they're saying that when you play by yourself or when you play in a Veteran Mode Flashpoint, you're not guaranteed to have a tank. There's a much higher chance you're going to be hit with stuff, so we're going to give you some more health. They're also going to reduce the amount of power you get, as they just don't want that gear to be as powerful as playing the harder content. When it comes to the additional territory stats, such as accuracy, critical chance, alacrity, those stats are going to remain very similar across the different ones. There's going to be a slight boost as you get better gear, but nothing too significant. If I'm looking at item rating 326 DPS gear and I'm comparing the Conquest gear to the Veteran Mode Operation gear, we're going to be finding that by moving from Conquest gear into blue Operation gear, we're going to be having slightly more mastery. We're going to have significantly less endurance, significantly more power. Our accuracy is going to increase ever so slightly. As I said, not a big difference. Our crit's going to increase ever so slightly. and our alacrity is going to increase ever so slightly. If we look at the difference of going into master mode operations, item rating 330, we're going to be looking at quite a bit of additional stats compared to the veteran mode 326 gear. We're going to see a nice increase in the amount of mastery. We're going to see a further decrease in the amount of endurance we have. We're going to see a very nice increase in power. So that's how your DPS gear is going to work generally. The gear that's from the harder content will give you more mastery and power, making you much stronger while reducing your endurance. For the tanks, it's a little bit different as they start off with less endurance and they actually start off with a little bit more mastery when they're doing conquest gear. So if we move from 326 conquest gear to 326 blue veteran operation gear as a tank, we're going to see that our mastery will actually decrease. We're going to see our endurance will increase. Those two numbers will change by about the same amount. You have 0 power as a tank. Defense stat, according to my numbers, you actually go down in defense stat. Not a big deal, we're so oversaturated. And the shield and absorb stay the same. So I'm a little disappointed. Tanking stats are not significantly better. When you go into master mode operations though, you definitely will start seeing that benefit, especially being able to go up to 330 level gear. I did not run the numbers on healer based gear. So hopefully that gives you a good general idea of how they've kind of changed the gear depending on if it's green or blue and purple, what kind of differences you can expect to see as you transition from one gear path to another. So this brings up something really interesting when we want to talk about the things with our gearing when it comes to being able to hit enough accuracy that you don't miss targets, having enough alacrity to make your global cooldown and your abilities faster, and being able to hit those defense stats as a tank. So all of these stats are now going to require a lot more points than before, and it's going to be harder to hit those stats even when wearing 326 gear than what we're currently used to wearing 306 gear. Because none of this gear is moddable, you're stuck with the stats they give you, and it makes it very hard to get the appropriate stats, especially since legendaries and their bonuses are very important to your class. They're locked into having the stats provided by the legendaries that they give you, and you can't use that to help modify your stats. So it's very important that you have augments if you want to be able to get those stats close to what you want. And then once they release 7.1 with the new R4 operation, you will have a chance to farm all the way up to 334 item rating. And once you hit 334 item rating in that patch or any of the later patches during this expansion, then you'll unlock access to a moddable gear vendor where you can buy all the pieces and you can pick and choose which stats you want, which will be nice. But initially, for quite a while, we're going to be locked out of that. All right, so what is going to ultimately be changing and what is staying when it comes to the gearing in 7.0? Amplifiers, they're gone. No more amplifiers anymore. Tacticals, these are staying. Most of the tacticals will remain unchanged. Some of them are going away and some of them are changing. Just be aware that when you transition, some of them might not be the same, but most classes will be getting to keep their tacticals and still be using the same one. Or some of the tacticals are now actually being rolled into abilities that you just get passively anyways as a character. So you're going to be picking up a new tactical that will look weaker, except that you've gotten the benefit of the previous tactical being part of your class. Augments are staying. There's going to be no change to augments in the game. We don't know when the new crafting system is going to launch and when they'll bring new augments. There's currently no estimated time of arrival. Set bonus on gear. You're no longer going to have your set bonus on 2, 4, 6 pieces of gear. It's now going to be moved to those 2 legendaries, which are in your implant slots, and that's all you're going to need for set bonuses. Moddable gear, this is gone. As we were talking about a little bit earlier in the video, you no longer have moddable gear. You can't mod your stats. Once they release 7.1 and drop the R4 anomaly on veteran mode, we will be able to farm up to item rating 334, and then at 334 you will unlock a vendor where you can buy all the moddable gear like we're used to, and you can pick and choose which stats you want. In future updates of this expansion, they promise that they're going to increase the item rating cap for all the other types of gear as well, so that other people can achieve 334 and unlock the moddable gear vendor. No estimated time of arrival for that. Gear is still bound to legacy, so you can definitely share it around between all your characters. That will still be a very powerful part. I feel like generally though it's going to be harder to farm additional sets for all of your alts in the current system, but it's still going to be something where you can swap your gear around until you find your best set, and then you just start farming sets for your alts while wearing the best set. Item rating for PvE will no longer determine if a gear is green, blue, purple, so on. I find this a very weird choice. I don't like how they've decided to create so many gearing paths and create the colors like this. So now you can have blue gear at the same item rating and it'll have slightly different stats. I find that it just makes an overly complex system. I'm not a fan of it. For whatever reason, PvP gear though is continuing to have the green, blue, purple as you progress higher item ratings, probably because there's only one gear path for PvP. Thresholds have changed as we talked about, so you're going to need higher stats to reach the same thresholds when it comes to the same amount of accuracy, critical, defense chance, etc. Hopefully that gives you a great overview of the new gearing system and what to expect from 7.0 and the way that different gear is going to go. I know it's pretty complicated and a lot of people won't need to know all the information in this video. You just need to know the general ideas. Once I get to the highest item rating, what do I want to figure out for getting all my gear into the appropriate gear path that has the best stats that I can get? And we can't even worry about moddable gear for a very long time. So I'm really hoping that when they release 7.0 live, they're going to tweak some of the ways that we obtain the upgrades to make the grind a little bit less frustrating and a little bit easier on players. Now, I will still be releasing videos on some of the ways to min-max that grind if that is your chosen playstyle. I always suggest that play the game the way that is the most enjoyable and the most fun to you instead of focusing on grinding, because that's an easy way to not enjoy the game or to suffer from burnout. As always, have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.